Today we will be starting with the atypical cervical vertebrae. Okay, my class will be a shorter one because after that you will be having histology class. Okay, we will be reading about 3 vertebrae today. First one is C1, C2 and C7. These are the atypical cervical vertebrae. Atypical cervical vertebrae. Typical vertebrae will be covered in next class. So there are 3 atypical cervical vertebrae. So first of all, you don't need to write anything. Okay, if you need anything to copy, then I will ask you to copy. Just I will ask you to click few pictures and correlate it. There are many muscles that will be named today. You may not be able to correlate because you have not seen the muscles, or there has not been yet the theory class as well. So just follow. After the dissection of theory class, you will be able to correlate. Okay, whenever I ask you to click a picture or draw a freehand diagram, just do it. Okay, atypical cervical vertebrae. There are 3 atypical cervical vertebrae. First one is C1, that is Atlas. Why is it called Atlas? Any idea? Atlas kaun tha was Atlas? Have you heard about Atlas? According to Greek mythology, Atlas was the god who used to carry the globe, the weight of earth. Atlas. Exactly this bone carries the globe of our skull, base of the skull. That's why it is also known as Atlas bone. C2 is known as axis bone, and C7, that is known as Vertebra Prominens, also known as Vertebra Prominens, because it is having a prominent and long spine. Okay, it is having a very prominent and long spine. See, this is the long spine. Okay, now we will discuss the vertebrae separately. First one is C1 Atlas. Okay, so there are few features, special features of Atlas. The Atlas cervical vertebra, that is not having any body. It doesn't have a body and it doesn't have a spine. Atlas cervical vertebra में ना spine है ना body है. Okay, there are 2 lateral masses, दोनों एक साथ फ्यूज होता है, जुड़ जाता है. सामने है anterior arch, there is anterior tubercle, पीछे है posterior tubercle. Anterior tubercle, posterior tubercle, and side में क्या होगा? Transversely present, transverse process. इसमें होगा, there is one foramen, that is known as foramen transversarium. Foramen transversarium. Okay. Now look at this picture. See, this is your Atlas or C1 vertebra. What is this? This will be anterior tubercle. This is posterior tubercle. This one is, see, this one is transverse process, right? This is also transverse process. और उसमें जो foramen है, that is foramen transversarium. This is your facet, superiorly present. So it will be superior articular facet. Inferiorly, this one is from below. This is your inferior articular facet. Which joint does it form? This one. Superiorly कौन सा bone है? Just above the atlas. Which bone is there? There is occipital. So which joint will be formed? नीचे है atlas, ऊपर है occipital. दोनों मिलके atlanto-occipital joint. Atlanto-occipital joint. नीचे कौन सा है? Atlas के नीचे C2, that is axial. The joint will be atlanto-axial joint. Atlanto-axial joint. Right? Now see the difference. This is the inferior facet, right? This is the superior facet. Can you differentiate between them? Look at the shape. This is somewhat kidney shaped, right? Kidney shaped. And this is more or less circular. Inferior facet is circular or round. And superior facet is kidney shaped. Okay. So now this irregular prominence, can you see it? Huh? There is one ligament attached here. There is one ligament attached here. That is transverse ligament. Okay? Click a picture. Picture lo. If possible, make a freehand diagram in your notes. Okay? Now this is the, look at this thing. What is this? This is also a facet, right? This is a facet for, what is written here? This is a facet for dens. Facet for dens. Dens कौन सा bone का part है? What do you think? Dens is a part of C2. That is axis. This is a special feature of C2 vertebra. नीचे के dens आकर यहाँ पर लगता है. This is a facet for dens. Now see, this is your C1 or Atlas vertebra. What is this thing known as? This is known as vertebral foramen. Vertebral foramen. Okay. See, this is a ring shaped, right? What is this thing? This is anterior tubercle. This is posterior tubercle. These two are transverse process. What are these foramens? Foramen transversarium. This is vertebral foramen. What is this? Superior articular facet. What's the shape? Kidney shaped. See, below these are the inferior articular facet. These are circular, more or less circular. Right? Easy. Now there are few attachments. Okay. So these are the lateral muscles I told you about. Okay. This is transverse process. So there are few attachments. There will be a picture shown to you. Click a picture of that. Everything what I have written, you will be able to correlate this picture. Okay. Now look at the special features first. This is Atlas. I have already told you people, just reading it. It is a ring shaped and consists of right and left lateral muscles connected by a short anterior arch and a long curved posterior arch. Right and left transverse processes seen. Of the feature, absence of body, absence of spine, there are relatively longer transverse processes. Superior articular facet are concave and elongated. They are kidney shaped. Of the direction, upwards and medially. Articulate with the corresponding condyle of the occipital bone, forming the atlanto-occipital joint. Right? The inferior articular facets are more or less circular. It is directed downwards, medially and backwards to articulate with the corresponding facet on the axis vertebra to form the atlanto-axial joint. नीचे axis, ऊपर atlas, atlanto-axial. ऊपर है occipital, atlanto-occipital joint. ठीक है? The medial surface of the lateral mass is marked by a small roughened tubercle to provide attachment to the transverse ligament. This one. This is the transverse ligament. Okay. The transverse processes project laterally from the lateral mass. These are factual things only. They project laterally. Okay. Now the attachments. See, whatever I have written here, everything has been shown in this picture. Take a picture of this one. Take a picture. These things have been taken from the textbook of IVC, which I used to study. I find this book easier to understand. Okay. See, now just go through the bones once again. Then you will be able to describe the attachments. This is anterior tubercle. This is posterior tubercle. This is transverse process. Right? Now, what is this thing called? Have you seen in the picture? See, this is the groove for vertebral artery. So, which structure will pass through this? Vertebral artery, right? That's why it's named as groove for vertebral artery. यहाँ पर vertebral artery होगा. See, so through the groove for vertebral artery, what structure is this? This is the vertebral artery. Just below that, there is one. See, the fast cervical nerve crosses the posterior arch deep to the vertebral artery and divides here into the anterior and posterior primary ravine. This is the anterior primary ramus and this is the posterior primary ramus. Done? Now, what is this ligament? This is a transverse ligament. This is the anterior tubercle, right? What are the muscle? What is the attachment here? Fibers of longus colli. Okay. Now this is the posterior tubercle. Adjacent to the posterior tubercle, what are the structures? Ligamentum nivae and then rectus capitis posterior minor. Rectus capitis posterior minor. Now along the transverse process, what are the structures? See, this is the anterior most part, right? This is the anterior part, this is the relatively posterior, right? So anterior most structure is rectus capitis anterior. Rectus capitis anterior, and lateral to that is rectus capitis lateralis. This one is levator scapulae. Levator scapulae, and this is the oblique capitis superior. Oblique capitis superior. Okay, exactly these things are described here. See, oblique capitis superior, where is it present? At the posterior part of the transverse process, right? Superiorly. That's what's written here. The oblique cavity superior arises from the posterior part of the upper surface of the transverse process. There is another muscle known as oblique capitis inferior. वो कहाँ पर होगा? Inferiorly, नीचे की तरफ होगा. Cannot be shown in this picture. And the splenia cervici, these are inserted into the inferior aspect of the transverse process. Right? So adjacent to the transverse process, there are the rectus capitis anterior, rectus capitis lateralis, levator scapulae and oblique capitis superior. Along with the posterior tubercle, rectus capitis posterior minor, ligamentum nivae. This one is the transverse ligament, and adjacent to the anterior tubercle, there are some fibers of longus colli. Longus colli. Okay. Have you taken a picture? Whatever I have described here, that has been written in these things. If you understand the picture, no need to read these things. Right? Now the second one is C2, that is axis. Special feature में होता है, it has odontoid process, also known as dens. This is the C2 vertebra. This is the C2 vertebra. This is the odontoid process. See, this is the odontoid process. It was the facet for dens, right? It was the facet for dens. They attach each other like this. ठीक है? Like this. This was the facet for dens. That is the dens or the odontoid process. Odontoid process. ठीक है? Transverse processes are relatively small and like the anterior tubercle. The parts are same only. So if this is the dens or odontoid process, this will be the transverse process, right? This will be the transverse process. And what is this foramen? Foramen transversarium. This is the vertebral foramen. Vertebral foramen. These parts, these are known as, what are these things? It was shown in lumbar vertebrae as well. These are the lamina, and these are the pedicles, and these are the facet, superior articular facet. जो जाके लगेगा कहाँ पर? Inferior articular facet of Atlas, forming the atlanto-axial joint. यहाँ पर आकर Atlas का inferior articular facet लगेगा, forming the atlanto-axial joint. And look at the spine. See, can you see the spine is strong or thicker, relatively thicker, right? And the tip is bifid. दिख रहा है ना? The tip is bifid. Okay, these are the features. Now read with me. Presence of odontoid process I have shown. Transverse processes are small and lack the anterior tubercle. Anterior margin of the inferior surface of the body projects downwards to a considerable extent. These are facts. Factual things only. Foramen transversarium is directed superolaterally. Superolaterally. In typical vertebrae, it is directed vertically. It will be shown in later classes. Inferior surface presents a deep and wide inferior vertebral notch placed in front of the inferior articular process. The superior vertebral notch is shallow and present behind the superior articular process. Factual things. Okay. The spine is massive. It is large, thick, and very strong, and deeply grooved anteriorly. Tip is bifid. The lamina are thick and strong. So these are the parts. This is the dens. This is the dens. This is the facet for anterior arch of Atlas. यहाँ पर Atlas लगता है ना? These are the facet, superior articular facet. It forms the atlanto-axial joint. These are the inferior articular facet. नीचे की तरफ होगा. And this is the body. See. These are the inferior articular facet. These are the inferior articular facet. Obviously placed inferiorly. And this is the body. This is the body. Okay. Again this picture. Dense facet for Atlas. Pedicle, lamina. This is the body. And this is the massive spine. These are the transverse process and foramen transversarium. Okay. So see, if fracture is there, this region, if there is any fracture in this region, it is known as, this is slightly clinical. It will be taught in ortho. If there is fracture in this place, this is known as hangman's fracture. Hangman's fracture. Why so? It is most commonly seen in judicial hanging. Okay? Judicial hanging. Okay? Judicial hanging matlab? What is judicial hanging? किसी को नहीं पता? Suicide is not judicial hanging. There are difference between these two things. The capital punishment, जो फांसी दिया जाता है, capital punishment में, that is judicial hanging. There are difference between judicial hangings. Hanging में कौन सा fracture होता है, suicidal hanging में कौन सा fracture होता है, उसमें difference होता है. It will be taught in forensic. Okay. So this is the most common site of fracture in case of judicial hanging, also known as hangman's fracture. Hangman's fracture. Okay. Now the important attachments and relations. Everything has been written. Just read with me. Okay. This was the dens, right? There are these ligaments. Can you see what are the attachments of the dens? This one is apical ligament. Along with the apical ligament, there is right and left alar ligament. Right and left alar ligament. Right and left alar ligament. This is the, what is this region? Transverse process. So along the transverse process, what are the structures related? Ligatus scapulae, splenius cervicis. Take a picture of this one. Ligatus scapulae and splenius cervicis. Just you have to know the parts. Then you will be able to describe. This was the body, right? This is the posterior part of the body. Which structure is present? Membrana tectoria. Posterior to the posterior part of the body. This was the, which region? Spine. Along the spine, what are the structures present? This one is obliquus capitis inferior. This one is rectus capitis posterior major. Rectus capitis posterior major. And again this one is ligamentum nuchae. And what is this region? Lamina. Along the lamina, which structure? Semispinalis cervicis. Semispinalis cervicis. Once you read about the neck region, triangles, you will be able to correlate with the muscles. Okay. Again, repeat with me. What are the structures related to the dens? Apical ligament, right and left alar ligaments. Adjacent to the transverse process, levator scapulae and splenius cervicis. Lamina पे क्या है? Semispinalis cervicis. और यहाँ पर spine पे ligamentum nuchae, obliquus capitis inferior, rectus capitis posterior major. And in the posterior part of the body there is membrana tectoria. Done. Everything has been shown in this picture apart from these three. Write it down. Write it down. These structures have not been shown in the picture. See, the vertical part of the longus colli, it attaches to the anterior aspect of the body. The vertical part of the longus colli, it attached to the anterior aspect of the body. The scalenus medius arises from the anterior aspect of the transverse process. Scalenus medius arises from the anterior aspect of the transverse process. Other muscles attached to the spine is, other muscles attached to the spine are, first of all, multifidus, spinalis cervicis and the interspinalis. Multifidus, interspinalis and spinalis cervicis. Spine पे क्या गया है? Multifidus, interspinalis and spinalis cervicis. This is the last atypical cervical vertebra, that is C7, also known as Vertebra Prominens, because it is having a prominent and relatively longer spine. What are the parts? Obviously the same. This is the body. What is this foramen? Foramen transversarium. So this will be the transverse process. This is the posterior tubercle. Posterior tubercle. This will be the which facet? Superior articular facet. Superior articular facet. And this is the spine. And what is this thing? Vertebral foramen. See. This is your C7 cervical vertebra. Vertebra prominens. This is the body. You can see the foramen transversarium. This is the posterior tubercle. What is this thing? These are the superior articular facet. This is the spine. This is the spine and this is your body. Right? This is the C7 cervical vertebra. Okay. What is the difference? What is the features? The spine is strong, long, but not bifid. This one was, the tip was bifid, right? But this is not bifid. Okay. And transverse process is relatively longer. Relatively longer. The foramen transversarium is relatively small and does not transmit the vertebral artery. It transmits the accessory vertebral vein only. Foramen transversarium से vertebral artery नहीं जाता है. It transmits the accessory vertebral vein only. ठीक है? Accessory vertebral vein only. Now there is something known as occipitalization of Atlas. Occipitalization of Atlas. What is it? There is congenital fusion. Congenital fusion of ring of Atlas with the base of occiput. दोनों एक साथ fuse हो जाता है. This is one of the most common abnormalities in upper cervical region. Upper cervical vertebra, one of the most common congenital deformity. This is also known as occipitalization of Atlas. So one is hangman's fracture and one is occipitalization of Atlas. Okay. So this much from me.